one, and we're live. You're tuning to the Cosmic Children podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and today I have a very interesting individual in the studio with me. I find it quite hard to describe what this individual does because I find it to be fascinating. So to kickstart the conversation, how would you describe what you do?
All right. So, hi, my name is Pearlyn. I generally now introduce myself as an intuitive reader, yoga teacher, and quantum activator and facilitator.
Yep.
So, and that always sparks a conversation.
I'm sure it does.
Enough to kickstart. Yeah, so that is how I introduce myself. Yeah.
So that begs the question, so many tangents. What is quantum activation?
Okay, so this is in my own terms and in just simply the work that I do. I'm not sure if you've heard of the term star seeds.
Well, what is that?
No, okay. So star seeds, basically there's this belief that plenty of souls have incarnations, right, across different galaxies, and then they've come onto Earth from other galaxies to be of support to humanity over here. So in quantum activations, my work generally is to help souls or star seeds to figure out or fulfill parts of their life's purpose in that particular incarnation. I mean, in the larger part of the work that I do with intuitive reading, I do that also. But for quantum activation, it's pretty specific because from what I'm able to sense, and I'm going to sound a bit cuckoo right now, I'm able to see quantum transmitters that star seeds have that hold on to technologies that and knowledge and wisdom that they might have gotten through their previous incarnations in other galaxies. That is to put it as simply as I can. Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, I have to ask, do you have psychic powers?
I don't call myself a psychic, but I can see why people say that. I just think I'm very sensitive and I have sensibilities that most of us wouldn't have the chance to develop. Yeah, but I managed to develop these abilities and skill sets just over time. Yeah, so
you used an interesting word there, which is sensitivity. How would you personally describe it?
So, you know how you would hear of people saying that they can see spirits and entities, or they can see the colors of someone's aura.
Yep.
I'm able to tap into all of that, but the sense that I have that's the strongest, we call it claircognizance. It's just a sense of knowing. I'm able to see, I'm able to hear, not very pleasant at night
Okay.
and during like 7 months. But yeah, the sense of knowing is something that I tap into a lot more. It took me a very long time to be able to trust it and know and discern what is truthful versus what is from my imagination and what is from my ego and forged behaviors and conditioning. I'm not someone who's very well read. I don't watch much movies also, but in a lot of the things I've expressed and shared with people, they tend to quote like certain movies. When we talk about spirituality and perception and perspectives of life, there are certain movies that people like to quote. They tend to quote those movies when I share some of my understanding from remembering past life or through stories that I share in general from my interactions with clients. So I think there seems to be a few threads that have been pulled, and I think it's truthful to a certain extent, all the things I do and why I still continue to do it. Yeah.
How do I follow that up? Fuck. Was there ever a time when you didn't have this, or was it something you grew into it, or was it something happened and you realized that, hey, there's something there that wasn't there before?
Right. I think that's a really great question. So I can't really pinpoint a point in time where, at least in this lifetime, I managed to figure out why I have all this. When I'm younger, I was able to kind of sense spirits and ghosts, and I caught glimpse of them like here and there. It's very like shadow-like. You can kind of see the form, but not really. Quite interesting. But I think I just grew up with my parents calling me very daydreamy, and yeah, then I just tagged on to it as having a really imaginative mind. Going through secondary school was really tough because puberty aside and then figuring yourself out, I was trying to put myself in that way of growing up that everybody was trying to follow through with to seem normal. So the conventional route, okay, I'm going to study, do well, maybe take the science stream instead of an art stream. Just because that will give me more opportunities, supposedly. Yeah, and I think like in forcing myself into that box and that trajectory, I realized what didn't work out. I'm very creative of person. I love creating. I love playing with different modalities and mediums. I think I never acknowledged how playful I was as an individual growing up also, with really strict parents. So that was almost like the first turning point for me, because I already knew I was going to design school. Why do I even have to study all these things? At the age of 10, I knew I wanted to study interior design. Yeah, and then I went on to get my diploma in interior design, which I was really happy about. Went on to work for a bit. Then I realized I didn't want to be in the industry, even though I really wanted to study interior design. But in the grander scheme of things, I now understand why I had to go through design school. It was to kind of like open up my mind to different philosophies, because we studied design history and theory and philosophy, all those things, right? And it's kind of like every point in my journey was to inch me towards the things that I'm doing right now. I just didn't know. I only know in hindsight. Yeah, and I think one of the major breaking points or breakthrough moments for me was when I was in the airlines for a bit, and I went through really bad anxiety and depression. I've always been depressed like since the age of 10, and anxious. It's just not diagnosed, but because you're suicidal. So yeah, and I finally acknowledged the fact that I was anxious and depressed when I was in the airlines, because I have to serve passengers with a smile. But every time I stood down to grab more food, I'd be crying. Yeah, so I realized, okay, I need professional help. Started working on bettering my mental health. Got on that journey of going through counseling, being given medication, and then not wanting to count on the medication because I know it's to numb the senses, and I didn't like that. Also because one of the things that came out is that your sex drive would be low, and I was like, that doesn't sound fun at all. I don't
very practical.
It is. It was a really practical kind of mindset. I mean, like, if I'm already anxious and depressed and I cannot enjoy sex, I mean, that's not all life has to offer, but like to be depressed and then not have your outlets, like maybe imagine not being able to drink and smoke and have fun with it. I mean, there are limits to all these like substances and all that, but like to really enjoy life, I think I want to be able to feel deeply, and I wanted to honor my sensitivity. I'm so sensitive that I have anxiety, depression, sure, but I'll learn to manage it in my own ways without needing to count on medication. That was my standpoint at that moment. And what I started getting into was yoga and meditation. Which I really, really enjoyed. And that is why I decided to be a yoga teacher. I wanted to share my love for yoga, not in forcefully bending into certain poses, but the act of being present in your body and being present with all your feelings and the entirety of your being that has brought you to where you are, like to acknowledge and honor it and celebrate it. That's what I want with yoga. And but at the same time, when you're exploring yoga and meditation, spirituality gets in here and there when you're doing your research. So I started getting recommendations for YouTube tarot readings, like general pick a card readings. And I was like, what is this stupid thing. It's nonsense. Like a bunch of cards cannot tell you your future. You forge your future. You have free will. I didn't believe in it. I wanted to debunk it.
Yep.
So I started to learn how to read the tarot. Again, not academically driven, and I can't memorize for shit. Cannot sit down and read. So I decided to learn on my own, and I realized, wow, I actually have a knack for interpreting the cards naturally. And I started practicing with my friends. My family started to find out I was dabbling with all this, and they were worried because they know I was going through really bad anxiety and depression, and they're like, oh my god, she's going crazy for real. Yeah, so this happened just pre-COVID. So like 3 months before COVID started, I started to acknowledge that I have anxiety, depression, decided to quit the airlines. I didn't even finish my bond at that point in time. I think I was short or shy of like 3 months. Yeah. And I was like, fuck. I kept going to the psychiatrist every time, and I was like, I think I'm going to resign. And I think because the company's the psych would be like, you took 3 months to finally train up to where you're at, and like, you know, you got so many compliments from passengers, maybe you should stay. Every time I decide to quit, he would convince me otherwise, until this one time where I just wasn't having it. I really looked him in the eye, and I'm like, I don't think this is healthy for me, and I think I should have a say in this, even if you might think I'm not making the best choice for myself. I am going to say straight up, I can decide for myself. Yeah. So I think he heard how convicted I was, like, in wanting to make that choice. So he let me go with a nice doctor's memo. Yeah. Yeah. But I realized in all these moments growing up how I gave up my own personal power to circumstances, situations, systems, conditioning, expectations that my friends and family had of me. I grew up being the weird one in my clique, in my family. Also, like the way my parents and siblings would be like, you are weird. I grew up with that, so it didn't really help with like understanding myself as an individual, because I'm like, oh, I'm weird. Weird seems to be bad. But over time I tried to like affirm myself in healthier ways. I am quirky.
That's a lovely word.
Yeah, so I changed my mindset, and I think like just over the years of like struggling with having a healthier mental health, and then also through like just multiple relationships I've had with different partners, I realized like I couldn't pretend to be a version of me that people wanted me to subscribe to. Oh, you are a girl, you need to behave like that. You've gone through design school, you got your bachelor's of arts in design, you should be going through with that. No, I didn't care for all of that. I think after my diploma, a lot of my friends went on to get their degrees. I decided like, no, I actually like studying, even though I don't do very well. I love listening to the wisdom that the teachers have to share, and I want to hold back on that. So what I did was to go out and work for a couple of years, architectural firm, because I'm like, maybe I want to be an architect, not interior designer. Then in the end, like, doesn't seem like it. Went on to try interior design, also didn't feel like it. Hated the industry for many different reasons. Sustainability being a very big issue. Again, all these things like societal issues out of my hand. I finally learned over time. But then I thought, I want to know how it's like to be a teacher. Respected a lot of my teachers growing up, just from the wisdom they were able to share just about life. So I applied to teach in the kindergarten, got to try that out, wanted to know how it feels like to work in retail and to be of service to people in a front end kind of space, because I'm extremely introverted. Did that, wanted to know how it feels like to serve passengers, jumped onto that. So I've changed so many different jobs. I think a lot of my aunties and uncles ask my parents like, you okay with your daughter doing that? But I think all those experiences, like, in a grander picture of my life experience and what I'm meant to do, like, is to be able to see things from different perspectives. Instead of being the student, how it's like to be a teacher. Instead of being the customer when you're shopping, how does it feel like to have someone serve you and how do you do that to the best of your ability? And I think what I really wanted is to get a larger understanding of how to experience life in different ways, in different roles. Having been the daughter, the sister, the student, now the teacher, the service crew, and then now doing all this work in spirituality, I realized how all my experiences have given me the wisdom and knowledge that I needed to be able to give the guidance and clarity I need for a lot of my customers that come in, my clients. Who very often turn into friends just because those moments that we share are extremely intimate. I realized I love listening to stories. I love listening to teachers drift off topic from whatever's on the syllabus to talk about their life and how they've learned and grown to become the individuals that they are. I love connecting with random strangers on Tinder and dating apps, like just because of the stories they carry. And I realized I love conversations. I love connecting with people who can be vulnerable and truthful in all of their expressions. And I'm very happy for all the things that have led me to where I am, to be able to earn a living out of just doing that. I think, I feel like I'm rambling a lot right now, but like it's messy. I've had so many people tell me like, I'm so unstructured in the way I do things and the way I speak. But I feel like sometimes when it comes to storytelling, you have to tell the stories in the different parts and the different scenes. And if your brain has the capacity, it will piece all the puzzle pieces together and you'll see the larger picture. And everybody picks out their own message from the story anyway. So
I do think it's a very commendable way of living, that there is a certain sense of courage, or even like that you're willing to just go and try to do different things, because the flip side, or rather the opposite end of that, is you're just stuck in a certain thing. And there's internal conflict, because I don't think we are meant to be stuck in something, or like a position, or like a job, or something, anything for a long period of time. So it's certainly commendable, and it definitely takes a certain sense of courage, whether you know it intuitively or whether you know it consciously. I do agree. There's so many different tangents to go down, but I think something that stood out to me when you were talking, it's about you acknowledging your depression. And I think that's quite interesting, because with that particular sentence, it means that the flip side is also true. You are avoiding it. So has there been a time where you're avoiding, and what does acknowledging your depression mean or look like or sound like?
So I think in short, it is embracing a part of myself, or the other aspect of myself that I would deem as shameful at that point in time. I remember once this counselor told me, you'll never ever fully heal from your depression. You just get better at managing it. My ego hated that sentence, but now I see why it's true.
What changed? Like, why did you hate that sentence?
The thought of not being able to heal would mean that I am sick forever. Because that's the idea of like mental illnesses, right? Oh, you got a disorder, you got a problem. But I don't look at it as a problem anymore. I just look at it as a side of myself that's able to feel really deeply. And I recognized how I'm able to feel deeply without dwelling in the emotion. So that took a lot of trial and error and experiences to have gotten me to where I am right now. But the act of acknowledging it was recognizing that it's okay to ask for help and support when I needed it. And I think that's a large part that a lot of us in modern society struggle with, because we think asking for help and support means that you suck at what you do and you're not good at showing up in your role. But how you're meant to show up in the roles that you play is going to look very different at different points in your life. And I think we don't acknowledge that enough. There are moments where you really just need to take time off, and it is not something an annual leave of 14 days is going to be able to cover when you've worked so damn hard the whole year. Because you're showing up for everyone else. You're working for a corporation's dream that might not be even a dream that truly exists, just because of profits and business thingy, right? But like, what are you doing for yourself at the end of the day? I think in the smallest way, being present, being able to show up for yourself, being able to acknowledge all your emotions that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability, and that takes us being able to recognize that we deserve love and we deserve to show up in the best version of ourselves. We tend to hold on to conditioning and conform to certain expectations and standards that society have of us, only because we think that's the only way to be accepted. But at the end of the day, what we are trying to get is validation from everywhere else but ourselves. So acknowledging depression to me is being able to acknowledge a large part of myself that's able to understand experiences to such depths, because to truly, we understand that light cannot exist without darkness, right?
Yes.
Because if not, how can you appreciate the other side? But why should we then look at darkness as something that's bad, right? Why is feeling lonely and empty or feeling that void a bad thing? It's not a bad thing, it's potential. And that's the shift in perspective I had in the last 3 years, from acknowledging my depression and knowing that it's not something I'm meant to fight against, but to fully embrace and wholeheartedly love and accept in myself. And I think that's a large part that people who struggle with mental disorders or illnesses or feeling deeply, they tend to fight these parts of themselves and think it's something that is bad. But all it's meant to do in experience is to inform you this way of seeing things or being that perhaps you did not like and did not feel safe in your body holding on to. Yeah. So I think, again, a lot of things, but like acknowledging it has helped me realize like, I don't have to be at odds with myself. I can validate my own feelings. I don't need anyone else to tell me how I should be and how I should show up. And I'm going to conform to the likes of my own heart and my soul. Yeah, rather than that of anyone else's. Yeah.
How does it look like today then?
Today.
What sort of conversations do you have with it?
I realize I can't do small talk as much anymore.
Fair.
I feel like it's not value adding. I can see why it could be nice in that moment. Because unless you're very, very used to like diving into conversations and being truly honest with your feelings, it's going to be a struggle to be fully honest. But I have a lot more meaningful conversations. I realize all the people around me start to become a lot more aware and conscious just in me living in my own truth. I think like I've been told by so many of my friends over the years, and even with clients now, like they let me know how inspired they are just in the way I show up, even though they might not relate to what I'm doing. Or they might not understand or resonate with it fully. They see this liberation and they know how, especially those who have known me for years, like decades, right?
Yep.
They see how much happier an individual I am, and they recognize how I was able to pull myself out of situations that really did not serve me, like the boxes I was trying to fit. They recognize how, even though those ways of being are already very unconventional, like jumping from job to job, finally doing what I'm doing, they recognize that it is good to live in your truth and to acknowledge your feelings and to not avoid it. And I think like what I have to offer in all these interactions is my sincerity in the way I show up. I know that not everyone's going to receive me the way I hope for them to. But I know at the very least I am showing up in ways that are truthful to me, and they will receive what they're meant to receive. Yeah. And if anything, I think meaningful conversations, even more perspectives, especially with people who oppose my views, my thoughts, my beliefs, and the things I do, which is a great extent to my life right now.
Yep.
It helps me see things from the other side of life, and in their shares, in their disapproval, and it helps me feel very, very grateful for being able to have my heart and my mind so open in receiving stories, shares, people in the way they show up. I've had people, a lot of my clients are actually like suicidal and like have struggles with mental health. But I also have people who, I feel like sometimes when they come in for sessions, like it's like a confession booth. So they tell me how they've hurt other people and how they cannot forgive themselves. Like things that are super serious, like suicide, yes, rape, emotional abuse, very heavy topics. I realized if I had not experienced them from the different perspectives I had, even with like sexual assault and all this, I wouldn't be able to hold space for these kind of conversations, which is not easy.
It's emotionally taxing as well.
It does get heavy. It gets heavy, but I realize I'm able to hold space for these kind of conversations and to embrace those people, even if they are supposedly perpetrators or by law, what people would deem as the bad guy, right?
Yep.
I'm still able to see them for their truth, and I recognize how their traumas have brought them to where they are. And I think that in itself like has allowed me to live through life in the stories and the experiences that I've managed to read through my cards or through channel readings, through their shares, without having to live through it myself. And there's so much to be grateful for just in that, because I get to see life from all these different perspectives, to listen to stories that take a lot of courage, again, from the individual to trust me and to share with me. And that makes my life feel extremely wholesome and I feel fulfilled doing what I'm doing just because of all these stories. And I like just immense gratitude for life and having gone through suicidal phases, growing up, like the shift in perspective just from all these stories and shares helped me feel a lot more connected with like others. Even if it's just a one-off interaction, it is still meaningful. And that's what has come about me going through this journey.
I'm curious to know, what does holding space mean to you? What does it look like? Because I feel like it's something that people say, but people might have a different definition of it. So what does that mean to you?
I think of course, like I have my intentions when I deliver my sessions, right? Where I wish to encourage and empower the individuals that step in, support them in their healing journey. But when I hold space, a large part is holding space for that, but holding space for them to feel brave enough to share their truths, to know that I'm not there to judge them. I am there to receive them as they are. That is how I hold space. I truly allow them to show up in the ways they are. I can see when their defense mechanisms come out, their egos start coming into the conversation. And I will call that out when I can in the gentlest way possible.
Gotcha.
Because like, hey, you come in for a session for clarity, I'm going to hold out the mirrors for you to see yourself as you are. So I hold space for the supporting of this part of their journey, right? If you come into my session, you trust me with delivering a reading to give you clarity and guidance, I will offer you a perspective that I can see just in the way you show up and you deliver yourself. If you look at yourself as a victim, I'm gonna tell you to assert yourself and to step up into your own power. If you look at yourself as someone who has control over everything that happens in your life, I'm gonna tell you, no, you actually don't have control. And I think sometimes in life, like we don't always stay in one spot at the same time. Like we go through changes and different experiences. So my job is to let you see the other side of the spectrum and to help you recalibrate yourself to find what feels safest for you in that moment. And that is what I do, like in short. And that's what I do when I hold space. When I sign off like my emails with space to hold, right? I truly am sincere when I say it because I allow people to show up the ways they do. And I have friends who tell me like, hey, I don't think it's fair that you allow yourself to sit through outbursts that people put onto you and all. And yes, I have boundaries that I set on those ends, right, to protect myself. But I allow people to push the limits of what could feel safe for me in that moment, just to allow them to express themselves. Because I think that is something we don't have enough of in expectations we try to fulfill or trying to conform. Yeah, so in my sessions, I want to, as much as possible, be able to allow people to show up in those ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me like ultimately it's about the agency of the individuals that you meet, that they have to take the first step. Yeah. Is it always easy for them to take that step?
No, it's damn hard. It's so tough. The number of times I've had guys and girls alike, right? They start crying during my session and they're like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why the fuck are you sorry for even like feeling your emotions? Own it and be proud of yourself being able to cry in front of a total stranger that you paid money to speak to, you know, I put it very bluntly when I say things like that. I'm here to help you and support you, yes, but this is a service that I'm providing. So in you showing up, there's so much to acknowledge. You want to see change. You want to make changes, and not everyone can do that. There are people who live up till the end of their life at their deathbed where they have so much regrets. But here you are, you're trying to do something about it. Even though you're not at where you think looks best, you are taking that first baby step. And I think all these baby steps are meant to be celebrated. I always remind my clients that. Yeah, and I think we don't do that enough. Yeah, we look at the larger goal, we look at the longer term goals that we wish to hit and achieve, but we forget what has brought us to where we are right now. And we keep looking forward to the next thing, but we never take time to acknowledge when we hit the milestones we have, or even the baby steps that might be difficult to even take to hit the larger goals. You know, there's so much to celebrate. We forget that very often. Yeah.
Do you think the lack of understanding in just your own emotional well-being, do you think that is symptomatic of a larger problem?
From my own experience and from the stories I've heard, yes.
Okay.
I think a lot of us are very desensitized, and a large part of the population in Singapore, right, just from being so sensitive and being able to intuitively tap into things, a lot of us are dissociating.
Oh, that's two different words, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But they run on the same parallel very often. You dissociate because you feel like you don't have agency over or control over your situation. Perhaps because you are chasing a goal that you think you want, but that's what your ego wants to be accepted by others. It's a people-pleasing portion.
Yep.
Yeah, so it is very much related. So what was the term that you used earlier on? So I used dissociation and...
You used desensitized?
Yeah, desensitized also. Yes, that was the other one I mentioned. So we're very desensitized also because we live in this urban city and we just keep running into media for escape, or like substances or experiences, wanting that one trip per year to help us fix everything.
Yep.
It's all in a larger, grander scheme, like because of capitalism.
Okay.
And a lot of other stuff like in place that we can't fully fix or change unless as a collective we manage to recognize how we can actually do better than where we are right now. I think COVID is one of the best things that could have ever happened because it forced people to realize how important taking care of their well-being is. Your emotions are important because they are your body's way of communicating with you when it feels unsafe, when it feels overwhelmed, when it feels overworked, when it feels like it just does not want to do anything, simply. But we are in this society where we think productivity and efficiency is to be celebrated. You know, I have clients who come in very late for my session. They are very apologetic. I appreciate that. But I always tell them, no, sometimes like life happens and you just cannot have everything fit into all these boxes and expect it to work out perfectly. There are people who have all the money in the world and they have all these like organizations and structures in place, but then they're still unhappy. Why? Because they don't allow themselves to feel deeply. When you run into all the different mediums that you do, just to not acknowledge maybe, let's say, what people can relate to, a heartbreak from a relationship that was really significant. What you're doing is not allowing yourself to properly purge and release the emotions. This is why when you look through the list of sicknesses and disorders and illnesses that people have, stress is always one common factor that you see, and it's because you don't release your emotions and you don't feel into them. You don't allow yourself to acknowledge it when it's showing up. You block it out. And there's this whole thing with somatics. Somatics talk about you being able to tap into your body's wisdom, in being able to communicate with you, right? How it feels and the traumas that it's holding on to. Our bodies are smarter than we think it is. We think emotions are good or bad. Like happy is good, sad is bad. But it's not. They're all good. They're all super, super good. Why? Because they let you know when you feel unsafe in your body. And that is something that all of us need to learn and properly acknowledge. And when you're able to show up for your friends and family and give them advice and tell them like, hey, I think you need to take time off. Why can't you take that same advice for yourself also? Right? It's so easy for us to put our attention onto others and point out problems others have and they show up with, but we tend to forget to put ourselves first. Because we think if we put ourselves first, that is selfish. And then people start blaming you for showing up for yourself. But of course, we don't want to go all the end of the spectrum where we really become selfish and we put ourselves first. We forget that we have relationships with other people. We have to stay connected with the people around us. I've been through like both ends of the spectrum and I know how unhealthy it can be. And I can see when individuals are showing up where they're like, I'm all about self-love, self-care, but they actually are neglecting themselves because they don't allow themselves to connect with others just because they go inward so much. And it's a very, very, it's not even a fine line. It's a whole spectrum, right? And you need to find what works for you in that moment, without getting too comfortable with the ways of being that you have been living with, but still pushing yourself enough for a bit of growth and yes, a bit of discomfort, but still safe enough to work past whatever you are going through. So acknowledging emotions, very, very important aspect.
How does one begin to do that? Because I must have missed the class on emotions and understanding your own emotions. So what does that mean? Does it look differently for each one of us? Does it look the same? Is there other questions one can begin to ask themselves? Because you could do it with other people. Some external party can help facilitate the conversation. But it sounds like ultimately you have to look inwards, which it's difficult.
It's tricky, but it's doable. So I think a lot of us, before we reach this space where we are a lot more self-aware, we tend to be in this headspace where we think we know ourselves very well. From the forged ego and identity that we are living through with, which can be very, very dangerous. You need to essentially be able to recognize your different identities and personalities. We all are multifaceted individuals. We need to be able to acknowledge when we have all these forged identities and ego self. That takes a whole lot of work. But I think the first question is to ask yourself, how present are you in your body?
How present am I in my body? Could you dissect that statement a little bit more?
When you're breathing, how does it feel like to breathe? How does it feel like to take a sip of water? How does the water taste like? How does it feel like to be interacting with another person in conversation? How does it feel like to be standing under the hot sun? Are you able to let yourself feel comfortable standing in that? Like all these simple questions. This is like the starting point. And that's why the practice of mindfulness have come into
Popularity. Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to use the term, but I wasn't very sure. I guess popularity, would be a way to put it. It's popular now because people start to realize like, hey, I want to know myself better. I don't know how. You start hearing things from different podcasts and resources. Oh, meditation, yoga, spirituality.
Checklist. Diets.
And then people will be like, I try all these things, how come it's not working out? Because you're still not mindful and not present. It's all programming. It's all programming. It's how we recognize the conditionings that we've lived through and how we wish to show up for ourselves. Yeah. So back to mindfulness, right? Like maybe if right now for everyone listening, like how does it feel like to be in your body? I think when I ask a lot of my clients and students this question, they get a bit like mindfuck. They're like, what the fuck you mean? Like in my body, I'm in my body lah. But no, how does it feel like to be in your body? So those who are a little bit more self-aware, they'll be like, oh yeah, I can feel like a bit of discomfort from maybe the tag on my clothes. I feel really comfortable in my skin today because I've been working on self-love, self-care. I feel a bit unsafe in my body because I went through a recent trigger that triggered a past trauma that I've experienced. You see varying responses depending on how self-aware an individual is, so like just simply asking yourself, how do I feel in my body? And I have this activity, right, that I like to tell people to do is, I call it like the vibe check. So it's like checking your own vibe and your energy level, So like just placing your palms facing down in front of you, allow your hands to float. So like you can try it now also to sense. So you can let your hands float and you feel this buoyancy, okay? You can feel the interconnectedness. You have your hands with the air around you. Let it bounce and try seeing how it feels like to put your arms up. Maybe if you're super happy, you just want to push it all the way up to reach up towards the sky. But if you're feeling a bit lower, your body tends to feel heavier and more tense. So your hands can maybe go down. And you start to allow your hands to float up and down until it finds a point that it wants to stop at. That's generally where your mood is at the present moment. And it'll look different for every individual. That's kind of like your vibe check to check on how you feel in your body in that moment. And if your hands are terribly low, that's a sign for you to take time out lah, generally.
Do you think these are like conscious, like I consciously want it to be low, or is it more like a subconscious, like you're not even thinking about it, that's why it just drifted to there and it's a sign that something is wrong?
I think it's most of the time subconscious. We might be aware and we know we feel like poop in that moment, right? But like we might not be as present with it. So we might generally know like, yeah, I've been very tired recently, but you never took that one moment to sit down with yourself and say like, hey, I am really tired and it doesn't feel very nice to be here and I do want to feel better. We throw it out in conversation so casually. We are like, yeah, I've been very busy recently lor, then very tired lor, then not enough sleep. But no choice, got deadlines to hit. You prioritize everything else before you being present in your body. That's gonna feel unsafe. It will never ever feel safe. If you feel safe, it's only because you've conditioned yourself to think that you feel safe in that moment and you tell yourself you need to keep hustling anyways because like, you know how to put food on the table, how to feed my family, how to pay down the next loan that I've taken up. There's so many things that we worry about, but like, why is it so hard for you to sit with yourself and just breathe? Because to truly live is to just allow yourself to feel into your breath and be present with it and to appreciate every breath that you have. I believe in multiple incarnations. Yes, you can come back in another life form and then respawn a million times, but like, you want to truly appreciate where you are right now still, right? So appreciate every single breath that you have, every single sip of water you have, the food that you're putting into your body. Even moments where you feel hungry, like, thank goodness I have this, my body has this capability to tell me I'm hungry, or when my gastric hurts. I think like in Western medicine, right, we always try and fix the symptoms. We don't go down to root cause. What we are doing in that moment, for example, like when I was going through COVID, I didn't take medication at all because I want to know when like I'm feeling too much pain. But I also know I have it on standby in case it gets too much. I wanted to know what my body was going through, because I know when the fever is up, it is my body fighting the infection. So the moment I stop having fever, I know, okay, the viral count is probably a lot lower now and my body is a lot healthier. I can be a bit more active. I allowed myself to be my own sensor and my own thermometer without needing that tool to measure. Yeah, and that is, again, being a lot more intuitive, sensitive, and sensible. Understanding yourself better and understanding your connection with your body better. I'm not telling everyone to do that. I'm not saying like, don't take the medication your psychiatrist is giving you. Like, please take it if you need it. But like, there has to be a certain level of awareness when it comes to your relationship with your body, and being able to feel deeply and to recognize and acknowledge your emotions plays a large part to that. Yeah.
I want to jump off the two different tangents. So the first one is, why do you think it's so important to understand yourself? Because it feels like, especially these days, it becomes quite commoditized. Like the idea of finding yourself, oh, you have to do X, Y, Z, or you have to do this, you have to do that. But I'm curious to know your answer. Why is it important? And what does it mean to find yourself?
So I think your self is constantly changing. Why it's important to find yourself is to, again, come back to your body, be present with yourself and know what you want for yourself right now. There's no fucking point in planning like the next 10, 20 years, right? Up to your retirement, right? And then actually like you live that 20 years being unhappy. Yeah, so finding yourself, to me, very simply, could look like, yes, a larger purpose, larger goal that you're serving in life, perhaps for a community or organization or purpose for humanity. Okay, it could be anything. Or it could be as simply like showing up for yourself, right? It'll look different for everybody. But in knowing that, you know what could bring you fulfillment in the smallest bits.
Is it like an answer someone has to find for themselves?
It is. And I think once you start to recognize that everything in your life is showing up as signs and oracles for you. I'm not sure if you've read The Alchemist. This is one of the few books I actually read through. It's a super good book.
What is that? Yeah.
Not to spoil the book, but like, we're all alchemists and we can create and forge our realities and however our mind allows us to, right? So finding yourself means understanding yourself, how it feels like to be present in your body, what you wish to do for yourself, what you wish to do for people. So your relationship with yourself and others plays a big part in this thing. And that is what helps us feel safe at home without needing an actual tangible physical home, without needing the validation from anyone else, without having to conform to standards that don't feel comfortable for us. Of course, there will be, and there definitely are individuals who are very, very good at conforming and sitting with boxes, and that is in their incarnation what their purpose is. Very simple. But then I think for a lot of us who recognize that we are unhappy chasing the things that we are chasing, finding your purpose becomes very important. Finding yourself becomes important. But I think the main message is just, are you able to understand yourself as the individual you are today, knowing that it's different from however you used to be, and knowing that you're constantly changing and growing because life throws you different curveballs and circumstances, and you have different interactions with different people. Everyone's constantly changing and growing. And how can you catch up with that? That's to know that you don't have to catch up with all of that, as long as you know where you are and you're present with yourself and you can validate yourself and you can be okay with everything that's out of your control and everything that's within your control. Yeah.
So assuming that the self changes and the self grows, are there practices or are there like rituals that, or are there goals even that perhaps a previous, perhaps you had when you were younger that doesn't serve you right now, and you had to, I guess, acknowledge that, oh, maybe I don't want that anymore. I want this right now, and just follow the path? Because some might feel that it's a bit too, as I say, the courage it takes to actually just acknowledge that this, maybe I've sunk in, let's say 4 years, maybe it's not working. I want to do something else. Has that happened to you before?
All the time. I think like I recognize that in all the different like job and workplaces I've jumped to and fro from, people think it's like, wow, you're not grounded at all. But then on the flip side, people would be like, wow, you're damn spontaneous and you allow yourself to just try different things, right? But I think like it's scary to change trajectories, especially if you set your goals and sights on something. That's why I always try to recommend, yes, you can have that long-term goal, but don't be fixated on that outcome. What you actually wish to achieve is some sort of emotional fulfillment. That is the actual goal.
Whether you recognize it or not.
Yes. And I think all of us should be able to at least recognize emotional fulfillment is what we want. We want stability also. And if we want luxuries in life and a certain standard of living, of course, there are goals to hit. But then ask yourself, why do you need all of these things to feel fulfilled? Do you really need it? Not everyone needs a lot of all these luxuries that we have, like I've known of so many people who manage to go into this very minimalist kind of lifestyle because they realize like it doesn't serve anything. But I've known of people who gone into that minimalist lifestyle and like shifted out of it because they realize like actually I need a certain standard to my living, and the food that I'm putting into my body, all that kind of thing. They want quality. So it comes back to understanding yourself, right? And understanding what you need right now. If you have a family to feed and kids to raise, that's additional responsibilities, more things to think about. But then you also still need to think about yourself. Why? Because if you don't feel good in yourself, you don't feel grounded in yourself, your cup is not full. How are you going to show up in the best version of yourself in every interaction for every individual that you are meant to support and help? And I think like, I remember saying this to my mom at the age of 13, when she's like, oh, maybe one day I'll run out of home and then you'll just be with your father alone, that kind of thing, And I told her, do it if that is what helps you feel liberated. Because I'm like, firstly, damn done with them quarreling all the time. But then also like, why do you want to be so unhappy where you're at? Like, do what you need to. And then she's like, no, but I'm your mother, I need to do this. Then I'm like, but you are your own person also. How can you neglect yourself? And I realized like seeing all these people around me growing up, right, being so unhappy, like I don't want to be there. And of course, I was still struggling with like expectations I was trying to live up to. Even until now, like I still am trying to find balance in all these aspects, which is part of life. But there's no point in being so unhappy in your body and in yourself. Yeah, and allowing yourself to, again, like back to like understanding yourself, your emotions, being aware, being present. That means not having to fixate yourself on one specific outcome. There are people who are then hung up on that one lover that they've had, right? And then they're like, yeah, like I messed that up then badly, or like didn't work through it properly. And then now I will never ever be able to find that same love again.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, we hear that so often. And I hear that like as a tarot reader, right? Like people come in for romance related stuff. But like, no, it's because you tell yourself that, then that is your reality lah. If I tell myself I'm going to receive love from every lover that comes my way, right, and they're going to give me nothing less than I deserve, then firstly, I'll create filters that I already know of and boundaries, right? I will not receive anything less than I deserve. If someone doesn't hit the checkboxes, I won't even entertain it. And when I'm able to see someone show up in the way I know I'm deserving of, I will receive. And this is applicable in all aspects of life. Our mind is so much more powerful that we give it power. We give it the acknowledgement it requires. The words are not coming up. But basically, we are a lot more powerful than we think we are. And why law of attraction and manifestation is a thing. I mean, you don't wish upon the rock and then hope it happens lah. But like, what's the actions and the mindset and the mentality that you're holding on to help you forge that path and trajectory into achieving the desired outcomes you want? Again, outcomes not in the way it shows up and presents itself, but the fulfillment that you wish to receive. That's the most important part. And it is always okay to know that that thing you committed to for 4 years will not necessarily be something that you need to stick through with, right? You don't have to be in that industry, but you would have soft skills that you have developed and other skill sets that you've developed that would help serve another purpose when the time comes. I think this perspective I have to thank my father for because he went in studying engineering. Share his life story because he loves sharing this story. He did very poorly basically for O-levels and he didn't have a lot of options, and he loves saying, oh, you're now very blessed with a lot of options. Last time go poly, just a few options only, the list less than 20, that kind of thing. And then engineering was just one of the few options he had. He took it, he learned so much from it. He didn't do engineering in the end, and he's like in the interior design kind of industry, but it comes into play when he needs it. I study interior design. I'm not doing it right now, but I know how to beautify my space. I know how to pack my luggage really well because I can do.
Props, man. That's a skill.
It's not easy, but it helped when I was traveling a lot, okay, and I was flying because I shop a lot and I need that space. But then design thinking, creativity also, that has helped me a lot. And I realized like how all of my different experiences, even though it might seem like it's not related, if you allow yourself to see it for a bit, right, with a bit more of an open mind and heart, you'll see how all these things actually help you get to where you're at and how it will actually serve another purpose. There's nothing to regret. I think like people who hold on to regrets, they hold on to it only because they cannot forgive themselves for supposedly taking a misstep, but it's not a misstep. If you know that it's not a misstep, then there's nothing to forgive, there's nothing to regret.
But wouldn't the idea of a misstep, like inverted commas misstep, mean that there's some sort of like a determined path?
So,
which is debatable as well because...
So many different perspectives to take on this, even for myself, and I acknowledge all of it. Sometimes we look at it, you have a larger life purpose, and if you don't lean into that purpose, people worry about it. Oh my God, what if I'm not fulfilling my life purpose? They come into my readings and they're like, what if I'm very far off? I'm like, you'll never be far off. Everything you've decided upon till date and will continue deciding upon until your deathbed will always serve the purpose it's meant to for you. Whether or not you see it, whether or not you acknowledge it. So, are you going to hold yourself to the kind of standards where you feel like you cannot fuck up? Or are you going to look at everything as part of your journey that's meant to be lived through?
It's two different frameworks to look at life through, isn't it? One is hyper-constrained because I assume people can't really predict the future. I assume they don't have any sense of what's going to happen when let's say they walk out into the street. They can't predict everything. But if you were to live with that constraint, everything I do next have to be part of this grand plan that I'm not the one writing it. That sounds terrible.
Yes, it is. And I think that's why like reminding people they have full autonomy in creating their reality is the most important part, right? Like, if you know that you're in control of the things that's within your realm of control, you wouldn't give up your own personal power to others around you, to society or whatever, anything, everything, right? You know that you're in control of the parts you can control, you allow things to happen and you manifest whatever the hell you want. You bring into existence the emotions that you wish to experience without judging the others that you preferably don't want to experience also. And I can say for a fact, till date, right? Because I suck at now at this point in my life, like having structure and planning, like I can plan KPIs and hit them for sure. I've done that in corporate and in many different places before. But like now how I'm doing things, right, is really through feeling into my emotions deeply and then allowing life to show itself in the best way possible. And this is very much linked to law of attraction also. So I don't worry about how my rent will be made, and I don't force myself to market myself the moment I go into that headspace where I'm like, I don't have enough money, what if I not enough money to pay rent this month or to feed myself?
Yep.
Not even to talk about the lifestyle I wish to hit in time.
Yep.
The moment I worry about all this and have this lack mentality, right? All my bookings start going away, you know. Like,
interesting.
They get postponed.
Yep.
I don't allow cancellations for that reason.
Yep.
So,
but something happens.
They don't come in.
Yep.
Yeah, like I'll have 1 week of no bookings.
Yep.
And that is a sign, an oracle from the universe to tell me like, hey, you need to check if your mindset right now is not healthy. But the moment I shift out of that headspace, I'm like, yeah, when it comes lah. Then I'm gonna splurge on myself now anyways. Buy new AirPods, go and buy new clothes, go and splurge on a good meal. Without like, of course, going into debt. Striking that balance. My bookings all start pouring in,
That's
you know.
interesting, yeah.
It's I'm living life in that sort of a way, and I think it's so wild for a lot of people to hear me share that, but I'm living, breathing experience of the fact that law of attraction is real, and if you allow yourself to see beyond what you allow yourself to hold on to, the possibilities are endless. Your mind is that powerful, and it can bring into existence the kind of lived reality you want. And you don't have to come into a space where you're like, yeah, I have to have like this amount of money in my bank set for me to feel safe.
Yep.
It's more like I feel safe no matter what. And I know that I'm covered. I know I'm taken care of.
Yep.
And maybe I say it from a space where I'm very privileged to have grown up comfortably in a first world country. And I am very grateful to even have all these privileges so that I can worry about all this other nonsense that my parents didn't have the chance to, you know, and wouldn't have the awareness to pick up on.
It's gratitude, isn't it?
Yes. Back to gratitude, which is showing appreciation and gratitude and acknowledging the good things that you have, which forge that reality that you're holding on to, right? If you're constantly nitpicking and looking at things to be upset about, you'll never ever be happy because you cannot see the good that's already in front of you. And I have people who will come to me and they'll be like, yeah, but I've gone through really tough stuff and you cannot understand. I'm like, yes, I cannot understand. But I can tell you, if you want to hold on to that mindset, you'll never get out of where you're at also. That's the truth.
It's
and
a personal
it's
hell,
harsh.
basically, yeah.
It is. And do you really deserve to be there? I'm going to tell you, no, you don't deserve to be there. You deserve to do way better. So why won't you allow yourself that? Do you not think you're deserving of love? This is why you're thinking you're not deserving of love, because of your past experiences and your hurt and your trauma. You go into the conversation, then I pull it out.
But it's interesting that while you were sharing, you're not saying that, let's say the thoughts on practicality, let's say paying rent, paying yourself and stuff like that. You're not saying that you are not having those thoughts, but you're acknowledging that they exist. But there is a conscious decision whether you would want to I guess, look it through that framework. There is a conscious decision there. We can look it through that, or there might be other different protocols and frameworks that you can look through. So it's not that you are not having those thoughts. Yeah. Interesting.
You still will hold on to all these thoughts. And that's why like I can say I embrace my depression because I know it helps inform me of something that is to be healthier. You know? So when I acknowledge these thoughts coming in, I realize, oh, my lack mentality coming in, I cannot manifest well. And then yes, the critical mind can be like, see, you're not manifesting well. And then even worse, you have all this wisdom knowledge, your clients come in and then you share with them the same message and then you're not following through. I can go down that path like so easy. My friends call me a black hole, like a wormhole, because they know when I spiral down, like it gets really unhealthy. But
black holes are quite beautiful, I think.
I think so too. Because I relate to it. And no, but to me it's potential. Yeah. And the moment I know that, at the start when I keep affirming myself, I'm like, yeah, it's potentiality. It feels fake, you know, to even say it. But like, that's why they say fake it till you make it. Like,
so there's some truth to that.
There is a lot of truth in it. You have to at least try to do that. And maybe at the start, those affirmations that people put out, I am abundant. They say that, right? Like, can work for some, but it works to a certain extent where like, okay, you're lying to yourself already. Then you need to change the language. It still has to be definitive so that you believe in it. So instead of I am abundant. It is I'm able to see abundance in all the different forms and ways that it shows up in my life.
It's a big difference between the two statements, isn't it?
Yeah. And it takes quite a bit of hitting your head against the same wall a million times to finally realize, oh, I can actually see good in all other things.
Yep.
I think like one of the things that helped me is really being grateful for the ability to breathe, the ability to have clean water in Singapore, and just like being close to nature, even though it's not really nature, like Singapore having planted the plants all around. Like these things remind me of how much I have, and I have abundance of that other people might not have. And it's not to be like, oh yeah, they're very poor thing, then they'll forever be stuck there. Because there is beauty in the society and the different landscape that they live in.
Yep.
Maybe don't have the kind of constructs that we are living with in the first world country, right? The world country, different kind of happiness, simpler lifestyles. That's why like Thailand, land of smiles, people so like, yes, there's a part where they are unhappy, but then they have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for other parts of life that we tend to forgo.
The culture there is different.
It's very
entirely different as well.
Yeah, and there's beauty in that, but like truly whatever life throws onto you, whatever you've been born into, it does not matter. It's how you choose to bring yourself out of that space. And it's that conscious effort, like you mentioned, and the choice to want to bring your head out of that space that does not serve you in that moment.
Yep.
And I will have days where I'm very dramatic and I'm like, oh, woe is me. And then like life sucks. It's not working out for me.
Yep.
Why did I choose this path? I should have continued flying, whatever. A lot of nonsense. But then does it help me feel better? Do I like feeling like that? If the answer is yes, then okay, I dwell in it. If the answer is no, then get the hell out of there, because like it's unhealthy for me. Yeah.
Do you feel that sometimes we tend to hold on to things way past the expiration date because of a variety of factors?
I think I do that a lot for myself, and I see why a lot of people do that. I think all of us are guilty of that to many different extent. You see, the thing is, we hold on to the idea of it that we were hoping to live into.
Yep.
That's one of it. Another one is the idea of it that we were living with that we really liked. That's why people hold on to certain connections and relationships or pets that have passed away.
Yep.
They cannot let go of grief because they don't realize that you can appreciate the precious parts of it, and you can have so much love for it, but you also can have so much hate for however things have played out.
Yep.
Both sides can coexist. The moment you think they cannot coexist and you're fighting it, that's when you cannot come into full acceptance of it. You cannot come into full acceptance. How are you going to process your emotions? How are you going to fully embrace the experience and move past it, and to hold on to it as part of your journey, but know that it's not to define your lived experience? Like, I think it's, again, a perception kind of thing. We find it hard to let go of all these things past their expiration date only because of the idea we have of how it should be. And the moment you recognize that logically, you can go through the line of thought where you're like, that's so stupid, this, and then you're not even letting go. Or you can be in the other space where you're like, I'm gonna actively try to find ways to bring myself into a better headspace. Go and seek whatever modalities help you. Maybe it's drinking till you're drunk every single day with your friends, or maybe after going through that phase, it's like, I'm going to go through a super healthy purge and be vegan all the way, Do whatever helps you get out of that space, but don't dwell in those moments for too long, because for you to transcend and transit out of that space, you have to go through the ups and downs to work past it.
Definitely.
There has to be motion. And it's better to generally be moving rather than stagnant. Even if you're spiraling down, at least you're moving.
There is momentum.
There is momentum. And with momentum, you can catch that pace and then move in a certain direction, because
Yep.
then again, tapping into your senses, your emotions, you know whether or not you feel good, feel bad, take whatever helps you in that moment. Yeah, but I think a lot of us do hold on to things.
It's interesting because the idea of holding on to something, whether you're conscious or not, there's a certain sense of comfortability with that. And the idea of, let's say, transiting, let's say, the loss of a pet,
Yeah.
you need to let go of it. You kind of know that it's important. You kind of know that you have to. But the idea of transiting through the entire process means that there is a loss. You're acknowledging that it's gone forever. It's not going to come back. And that could feel more... That potential scenario could feel a lot more scarier. Yeah. Hence the comfortability of, I'm just gonna hold on to my grief for X amount of years, no matter what psychosomatic symptoms it gives me and stuff like that. That's a lot more comfortable because I know that the past has happened. That's how our brains kind of rationalize the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And we tell ourselves the stories we want to hold on to, right? Like, that's how powerful the mind is. So, I mean, there are people who end up getting like Alzheimer's and all that. Like, it's gonna sound so fucked up, but people choose to have that happen to themselves.
Could you define that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
So, a lot of souls, right, when you read into it, right, this is, yes, spirituality, psychic related stuff, but also from stories I've heard, they choose to forget because it's more painful to hold on to those memories and to hold on to only the pleasant ones that they want to, or the ones that they feel somatically more comfortable living in. So we do choose all the things that we end up living with. For example, let's say, I'm threading the line so cautiously over here because I speak from a space where I've gone through sexual assault and been through that space where I'm like, I want to hope the person has the worst life that he can have, like from doing that to me. But then it became very empowering when I stopped looking at myself as the victim. And I'm like, no, because I'm not going to give him power to, or the experience, the power to hold me back from experiencing my life and to hold on to the hatred I have towards him. Forgiveness is, I mean, we hear it all the time, right? It means letting go. But like, what is that letting go? It is to be able to forgive yourself for showing up the way you did. We cannot let go of it, and we tend to be angry and we point at another because we cannot accept that we allow ourselves to show up in that situation, or life has brought upon that thing that now holds us in this unhealthy headspace and made us feel unsafe. You know, you just need to change your programming, your perspective, and it does take a lot of effort. But the moment you're able to see the other side and you acknowledge that this is not something you want to give power to hurt you anymore, you'll do so much better. You won't feel like it's hard to let go. You grieve. You grieve the loss of that version of yourself. So I think the ability to go through grief in any aspect of your life, the loss of anything, is something that's very important. And if you avoid that lesson in the loss of a job, circumstances, situations, certain relationships, the first time you'll truly experience it is when you experience the loss of a loved one. That's why it hits people so hard when their loved one pass on, because they feel like they haven't properly said the things they wanted to say, they have regrets, all that kind of thing, right? Yeah, and people don't like knowing that they don't have control over these kind of things and situations, but you need to know you have control over your perception. The moment you recognize that and you know that you cannot control how life happens around you, you should generally, theoretically, be healthy enough to work past any trauma that comes into your life. As unfortunate as it might be, as painful as it might feel, you'll be able to work past it.
I'm curious to know, the example you shared about recognizing and not viewing that experience as you are the victim, did that epiphany come randomly? Did it come true because someone was speaking and it hit you and you realized it? Did the heavens open up? Like, because we always have this idea of this muse or this epiphany, then everything time would just stop and we realize it. But I'm curious to know if you remember, like, was it just like a regular day and then you just realized it, and from then on it's like a shift in perspectives?
I think the shift happened over time from me mulling over it, and because the perpetrator was and I say this just for people's understanding, I don't look at him as a perpetrator anymore. He's my cousin, and he's like, I look up to him like elder brother. I don't have any elder siblings, so I looked up to him, and it was really painful because it happened to me when I was 10, and at an older age, I then recognized like, hey, it's fucked up what he did. It's not right. When school started teaching sexual ed, then I'm like, oh, that was not okay. Like for my cousin to have done that. And when I realized it, I was at the age of 13. I know like from that instance onwards, right, I've been very cautious around him. When he's in the room with my younger female cousins or my sister, I would plant myself over there to protect everyone else. Yeah, and the moment I realized what he did was wrong, from the age of 13 up till I think like sometime last year, I still held on to a lot of anger and grudge towards him. And I'm like, this fucker did this to me, and because of that, I didn't have a healthy image of myself, like sexually, just a whole bunch of issues that I wouldn't even get into. But like, I think like mulling over it for so long, then over time realizing, oh my God, I'm giving this too much power, and I need to reclaim my own autonomy over my emotions, and to properly heal from this is to acknowledge that firstly it's past, like expiration date we talk about, right? It's past however long already, and like it's painful for me, but like, and yes, because of that I've allowed myself to be in situations with past partners where like I just didn't dare to speak up and say like I don't want, you know, like I don't want the experience. But like I think like recognizing how it had played out over time, and if I still hold on to this narrative of he hurt me and I am still hurt, I will forever live in that headspace.
Yeah, it's technically not the past, it's the present.
It becomes but it's actually the past that I'm living in there. And it's so wild to think about it. And I'm just like, dude, Pearlyn, what the fuck? You still want to live like that? Are you serious? Because I think there was this instance where I told my partner like, hey, actually I did not want to have sex like last night. And I thought I made that clear. And he's like, no lah, but then like in the end it still happened, right? Then I'm like, yeah, but I realized I don't feel safe like in my body. And this is me speaking with a lot more mindfulness and self-awareness.
Yeah, maybe it didn't sound like that back then, but okay.
Yeah, like but like I put it into words in the best I could in that moment, and I'm like, I didn't feel okay. And he's like, actually, where does this stem from? How come like you're not okay with it? Why didn't you feel safe? And I pulled out a few different instances like where I recognized certain triggers and why I didn't want to be physically intimate with him that night. You know, or you upset me or whatever lah, like different reasons lah. And then I realized like part of it is because the way he showed up made it feel like I didn't have a call over my body and I didn't have autonomy. People will push the limits that they can to try and get the things they want. That is in every aspect of life. So are you going to give in to the person in that moment? I realized I gave in because of this narrative I had, and I just told him straight like, oh, these are my triggers, this is where it came from. And I think like it just slowly like kind of simmered in my brain. And one day like I was talking to this client who had experienced sexual assault, and it just flowed out in words where I'm like, you cannot look at yourself as a victim anymore because it's so damn long ago, and it's not fair to you to hold on to this narrative. You want to change the narrative because now you're no longer the victim. Now you have a say and you can speak up for yourself. And it might start out as a whimper, but over time your voice will keep getting stronger and you'll be able to shout in the face of someone who pushes those limits. I didn't dare to shout at my cousin because firstly I didn't know it was wrong, and like secondly like I was in a space where being very introverted, quiet as a child, I was just like, he is the elder brother, he should be taking care of me. But now knowing all these things from my experience, I know better. I can speak up for myself. This is the narrative I want to hold on to because I have the wisdom and I don't want to leave that experience for no reason, or I go through that, then okay, I hold on to the pain forever, and then I'm not gonna be able to say no to my partners in future. Isn't that crazy to even hold on to? And it wasn't like a moment where it was like, epiphany, but it's like over time I managed to put it into words, and only through a conversation was I then able to see I actually worked past that.
Yep.
And I remember growing up being the day he get married, I'll whisper in the wife's ear and then be like, do you know what he did to me? This kind of dramatic stuff, I was so angry and
rightfully so.
But it doesn't feel nice to hold on to anger. There's this story I shared with my father. My father's very overprotective lah. I shared this at the age of 18. I'm 28 this year. 10 years ago, I think he burned the book or threw the book away after he read it because he's like, I'm your parent, I'll forever worry. But the story is called Let Go of the Banana. So
that's a weird title, but okay.
Oh, it's simple. So how hunters would catch monkeys.
Okay.
They cut open a hole big enough for the monkey to put his hand into.
Yep.
But small enough so if the monkey holds its hand in a fist, it cannot remove.
Yep.
You just throw the banana in, that's the damn trap lah. And life will throw you a lot of these traps. So you want to let go of the banana or you want to just hold on to it?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that story is something that helped me in many of my experiences. I always remember that story because I tried to have a teaching moment with my father, and I see why it could have helped him. But I also see how it can help me in letting go of things that's way past its expiration. And that's not to say we want to forgive people who have hurt us and put us in situations that might be dangerous. Because again, your wisdom is going to look different and your circumstances is going to look different. You have to, with your own discernment, decide for yourself what feels safe for you in that moment. But are you able to let go of that old narrative that doesn't serve you anymore? I think that part is what we find very hard to kind of reconcile with, because it is a lot easier to look at ourselves as victims in those circumstances where we feel like we didn't have the power. And the truth is we did not have the power.
Yep.
But now do you want to have the power?
Exactly. Thank you for sharing the story. And it's interesting to hear you say that, because you're not denying that it didn't happen. Denial is also one particular path one might go down when faced with trauma, but you're not denying, actually you're acknowledging it. But hearing you say that the general feeling is a lot more empowering of a narrative to actually carry forward for the next however many years.
Yes. And I think there's this, one of my friends shared with me this story of this lady who was sold into prostitution in, I think, in India, and she got raped so many times, and of course she did not want to do sex work, but over time she came up with this tiny organization that ended up helping more women in that space. And she owned the work that she was doing and she was proud of it because she's good at it, And I feel wow, you hear these kind of stories and you're it's so crazy and wild to think someone can go through those kind of experiences and still live through it. But it is freaking possible, and everyone has the capability to shift their mindset and their perception of their reality in the way they wish to start living through with. Yep. So all these success stories are there, not only to inspire us, but to remind us hey, we actually can have full autonomy of our reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because the idea that an individual might have a choice in any particular say or matter, or have their own agency and be responsible for whatever they're feeling, whatever they want to do. The flip side of that is, if you're not having an outwardly successful or you're content with yourself, well, you have to acknowledge the fact that your shitty situation is based on your choices.
Yeah.
And that could potentially be a bitter truth to actually acknowledge and to come to terms with.
Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow, but the ego hates it for many different reasons. But you live with your ego identity, you don't feel happy, then isn't that way worse space to be in.
And the ego isn't the self, right? It's two distinct different things, right? Because the idea of you having many different selves, showing up to different roles, I think that some people might not be aware of that. Some people might hear the voice that could be their ego, could be their sense of pride, and people might think, oh, that's me, that's myself, yeah.
It's easy to live in that space because it's so hard to go through ego depths and depths of our identities. But we actually have to go through it in many aspects in our life.
What do you mean by that? Yeah.
So being a child versus being a teenager, being a supposed adult, figuring life out, being a daughter is going to look different from being a sister, being a mother to your children in future. You have so many roles to play. You definitely have different identities and personalities that you have forged to kind of show up in. You might show up in very similar ways in all these areas, and that can be dangerous because you will think like, I know myself very well because I show up in this way. But if you're aware of your stresses and traumas and you acknowledge that you forged this identity because you don't want to feel the pain you used to or the fear of having no control, if you're able to surrender that fear, you will then recognize like, oh, how this part of your identity, your ego does not serve you. Because it's actually bringing you a lot more issues than you should be living with. It's a tough pill to swallow. Very happy to serve it in a lot of my conversations with the people in my life also. But I think like, again, it does back down to like, hey, if you've been doing things in that certain way and you feel like you are at a standstill at this point in your life and you're like, how come not progressing? Because this methodology worked for 20 years. Because it's not fucking working already lah. Like, get out of there. Yeah, it's just that simple. But like, it's difficult to embrace, acknowledge and be like, yeah, actually I put myself in this space for 3 years longer than I should. I have so many clients who come in and I'm like, you're in this space for 8 years already. Then they come back, they like, hey, yeah, huh? And I'm like, yeah, huh? You still have to say yeah, huh? So now today I'm going to tell you, you want it to continue for another 8 years or you're going to stop it in the next 6 months. Stop lah. Very tired, right? Stop. Yeah. You're so tired, why still hold on to it?
It's definitely interesting to consider that sometimes we do know what we need to do, but it takes the right, I guess, season and circumstances to actually like come to a decision, and we need to wait out that 8 years to have someone external point it out to us. Okay, maybe it's time to let it go. And
it's funny because like, even myself, like my friends and family can tell me the same damn thing for so long. And I'm like, I know. But then for some reason, a random Grab uncle can share that wisdom, and it's in a different tone, a different language.
Different words together, in a sentence.
Different words, Sometimes the exact same words, just different tone, right? And they can say it super nonchalantly, like it's just a matter of fact, and it just slaps the right way lah. And then you feel that slap, then you're like, okay lah, I don't really want to be here anymore. So I think it's that moment that you need, and there's no point holding on to, oh my god, I stay here for so damn long, and then you start blaming yourself. Don't go down that path. Like, just recognize, okay lah, I want to move past this, and then start to move past it lah, and go through that tiny back and forth motion of jumping in from one end of the spectrum to the other before you can finally shift that angle and perspective to live life in a different way. That's all that it is, Life is not meant to be lived in a linear way where it's like through time. That's why time is a construct. But like, it's not like point A to point Z and then we go through the cycle like that, right? And it's that's why when we look at all those like trippy diagrams or mandalas, right? There's so much depth to it. That's how life is meant to be experienced. It's this ebb and flow, and there's this undulation of the different parts and aspects of it, and some parts will only come into play and be important maybe 30 years down the road, and you'll never know. But that's the beauty of life also. And if you're able to see things from this perspective, you will not be so like hard up on having things a certain way, holding on to very fixed perspective. You'll be able to shift from one perspective to the other, and to know there's no point in blaming the circumstances or people or situation. It's just, okay lah, I was there because maybe I a bit stupid lor, and I could have done better, and maybe I didn't know I didn't have the power like in that moment, I thought I didn't have the power, but now I know I have the power. So shift in perspective, embracing it, acknowledging it, and owning it, then moving past whatever is no longer serving you. That's the journey, ma. And that's the fun part to it also. Yeah.
It's interesting to consider the multiple identities you have. Let's say just as a child growing up, a girl, a woman, there is a physical change that people see, but people don't see the mental change you have, or even the spiritual change. Everything is unseen. There could be manifestations like the way you speak, but it mostly goes unseen. And I think I had a previous podcast with another guest before, and I think we were talking, and I think we perhaps come to favor or like depend on our eyes too much.
Yep.
Because whatever we don't see, whatever we can't immediately have that visual feedback, we don't acknowledge. We think it's something else. We don't believe in it. But a lot of the things, a lot of the mental, I guess, fortitude and the mental change development, you can't see that. Yeah, you really don't see that unless someone chooses to share it with you, unless you engage them in this thing called language and communication. You will know, because people change physically, fair, acknowledgeable, but mentally, 20 years, 30 years, hopefully people will change, because it is a journey. Yeah.
It is. And I think there's no shame in staying in one certain way, right? For the rest of your life. But like, if you know it's not serving you, why hold on to it? And I think why we hold on to all these tangible aspects is because we are on Earth lah. And like, this is the 3D experience lor. So if you want to go and think about multiverses and parallel universes, right? The magic, it's true, by the way. Like I managed to see many of these realities, but like, topic for another day. But you are here to live and love, and love comes with pain and suffering.
Unfortunately.
It does.
It's part of the package, right?
It is part of the package. You cannot have all those people love and like love piku lah. Like, no, there's no way. There has to be the shadow and fear that comes with it. Pain and suffering comes with it. Otherwise, how will you truly appreciate life or what it can offer? So tangible aspects, ouch, pain, but then love, like something that cannot be seen. Right? That's to be felt. You have to truly allow yourself to trust. And that is sometimes with a bit of blind faith, which can be very scary. But the moment you're able to surrender, you will start to see how you can see love and appreciation for all the things that have played out in your life and the ones that will keep playing out for you. You know, again, perception and how you allow yourself to see your reality. I think like, also like a super huge portion that has been coming up in conversations with my friends. I have this like group of like super conscious friends.
Super conscious friends?
Yeah, I call them super conscious.
Sounds like a superhero like team.
We just have very mindful and conscious conversations, but we can go all the way to like super beachy stuff also.
Cool.
So very fun, like very, very fun. We keep thinking about life and like how we're meant to experience it. And it's such a great reminder, every single thing, for you to recognize that you don't have to fully accept everything in your experience and to be like, yeah, this is good for me. But if you're able to see the takeaways you can get from it, you will start to see how there's no missed opportunities. You will start to see how all your lived experiences are important for your growth. And you'll start to see how every single person in your life is a teacher to you. They are teaching you something. They don't have to verbally say it. It can show up as an angry parent and a toxic partner, whatever. Like, we have all these terms, right? But all these people are teachers to you. Why? To learn to set boundaries, but learn to also push those boundaries, and then to learn your own bandwidth and what you're comfortable with. But also knowing that all these forged identity, ego, right? They might have served you at that point in time, but might not be necessary in a different circumstances and situation that you're starting to inch into. So it's this sense of like feeling again, and all these feelings not tangible. And it is very unfortunate if you have to allow it to come out and manifest in a physical form where you end up getting sick. And you're like, oh my God, I got like cancer right now because I hold back on all these, but you don't actually know. until like you go to some energy reader, spiritual reader, then you're like, oh, it came from here.
Yep.
Yeah, you can always trace back where it comes from. It's just something that you cannot see, and you cannot take for granted the fact that your emotions are important. Again, back to all the points we've talked about.
Yep.
Acknowledge it, feel into it, move past expirations when you have to, and be present with yourself lah.
Yep.
Yeah, and know that not everything is tangible. I have a lot of respect for my friends who are extremely pious and religious, because some people will be like, you cannot see God, then like how can you trust it, right? I think in a larger sense with spirituality and my own practice, like I know that there's greater power and there's something larger than, and I can respect that. I have friends who follow through specific practices in religion to
like
follow
rituals,
through.
Yeah,
Correct. And they always fall back onto that because they know it truly fills their heart. And it's something that you cannot see, you cannot feel.
Yep.
You cannot see, but you can feel entirely in all of your being. Why people say like, oh, I see the light, like when like Jesus came into my mind, or like I have Muslim friends who tell me like when they start falling back away from their religion, they realize they're straying further away. But then I have those who tell me like, oh, but then when I finally found my way back, like I realized everything just clicked and I just needed to go through that journey. That is how life is meant to be experienced. It's in all the intangible aspects, and that is what truly makes life special. You can have all the luxuries in the world, everything tangible, but you cannot truly appreciate life for what it is without this aspect.
Yep.
Again, it's that whole idea of light and shadow, yin and yang, masculine, feminine, high and low.
Chaos and control.
Yeah.
I find it funny, whoever programmed this particular matrix, that you acknowledge that you have power, you acknowledge that you have control, but then ultimately you have to see the way, you have to surrender. That is fucking funny.
Yeah, I love it though. Like I think like it's this duality that makes it so beautiful, and it makes life fun. And I say fun every time people come in for reading. I tell them, oh, very fun. They think it's a good thing. I'm like, oh no, fun because got ups and downs. But like that's how life can truly be appreciated. I feel like if you've never tasted a bad meal, how would you know when a meal is good, right? It's as simple as that.
Before we move on to the next one, I'm curious to know, do you think there are morally right and morally wrong things? What's your perspective on that? Branding.
No, I'm just kidding. How should I speak?
Yeah.
That's very much dependent on every individual.
Okay.
You can follow through with the collective view in society based off your level of comfort. I've had this discussion before with one of my ex. He's like, why is incest wrong? Then I'm like, cause like can have fucked up babies and all that kind of thing lah. Genetics,
like that. So that's a biological reason, yeah?
Correct. Then it's like, isn't that bad? Because like you don't want a child to come into form that's like less than healthy.
Yep.
Then he's like, okay, let's put that aside. Let's say we put that aside and they never conceive. Why is it wrong? I think I was quite stumped at that moment, because he's like, if they are both consensual adults and it's not like the child was groomed into it, why should we stop them? And I was just like, true.
The softest of replies.
Yeah, it keeps getting softer.
Yeah.
But I cannot fight that, because I have to say it's not for me.
Yep.
But it might be for someone in Alabama.
Okay.
You know, no, but like what feels right for you can feel very wrong for another person.
Exactly.
What is cheating?
Yep.
A lot of people look at this like a super terrible thing. You know, like I have friends who are like, yeah, if my partner cheat on me, right, I know to leave immediately. But I have other friends who are like, oh my God, I got cheated on, and then they get very, very sad and they hold on to it for damn long. No, like it's a perspective thing, right? Like it was unhealthy already, the relationship, the opportunity presented itself, the person cheated. Just that simple lah. But then no, we want to like hold on to other stuff and then put ourselves on a pedestal. Oh my God, I am the one who's right. I showed up in the relationship in the right way. The person who cheated is wrong. And then suddenly you put yourself into a victim mindset where you're like, I got cheated on, and then like, woe is me. Like, why? It's so tiring, right? But is there moral standards we should follow through with? Generally, try not to kill lah, and try not to steal lah. Not very nice, right? It's very unpleasant to be on the other end of
I would
things.
imagine so, yes.
Yeah. So imagine yourself on the other end. Would it be nice to take advantage of another person in that moment? Are you pushing the limits a bit too much? Where is your own personal limit, and can you understand the limit of another?
Yep.
How then can you show up to respect their boundaries,
Yep.
but still also get closer to what you want?
Yep.
That's up to each individual.
It's also interesting to consider whether you might be religious or whether you might not be religious. A lot of these moral ethics and moral code, they come from there. Or whether someone isn't religious, it comes from maybe the parents hearing something and they tell the kid and it's stuck. And if you don't acknowledge, or if you're unaware of it, it would just be stuck with you, and you generally don't really have a reply. Like, let's say the incest thing, it's bad. It's not for me. It could be for someone else. Who's to say what the experience of it is? Because I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than, the brother and the sisters are fucking. Yeah. I'm sure it is a lot more complicated.
I'm sure, and from so far the accounts I've read online, because these ones are interesting to read, they're like, no, I just love my sibling a lot. Then I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess if you want to express your love towards your sibling in that way, go ahead, right? But like, again, it's your own expression. Yep. It comes back to your own means of expression and what you feel is right. And that's based off conditioning, that's based off learned experiences, that's based off your own journey in life.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess your own definitions of it as well. Like the cheating thing, like let's say like if someone is open to, like someone's super monogamous, one partner, but on the flip side, there are people who have multiple partners and everybody is consensual, everybody's okay with it. That could be cheating in some other people's definition.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting, this whole idea of polyamorous relationship and monogamy, right? When government tells us you need to get married, and if you cheat, then that is not right.
Yep.
And we follow through with that system, people will think, that's why if you cheat, you are wrong lah. And monogamy is the right way to go.
Yep.
But how is it that we can have people who have multiple partners in their life and actually have the capability and capacity in their heart to love multiple individuals at a go?
Yep. We
can love so many of our friends, and we are not blind. We can be sexually attracted to multiple people at a go, right? And it's very normal, like to have that fondness. So what are your own values? What are the values you're going to follow through with? Are you with someone in a community where you feel safe enough to express that and to live in your own truth? Are these people who also align with your values? That's the larger part of it, I think, at the end of the day.
Because it's ultimately not about wholesaling, taking someone else's or like a religion's a moral code, right? It's you have to identify, okay, maybe this is wrong, this is bad for me, maybe I don't do this, these are the things I would never do.
Yeah.
And
I think like sometimes when I meet certain people who have like gone through different experiences and tried different religions before, they always come back with this specific thing. I realize in a lot of their shares, there is no one right way to do things.
Thankfully, there isn't. Can you imagine if there is?
Oh my God.
Thankfully, there isn't, but acknowledging the fact that there isn't means there is a sense of chaos because there is no order, isn't it?
Yeah, and that space for exploration, that is space to experience different things. And yes, there is risk, but there's also reward on the other end.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm curious to know, what is intuition in your definition? Because it feels like a word that there's a lot of woo-woo to it. Like, what the fuck is intuition? Is it like a sixth sense? People describe it as like the sixth sense. Like, you know intuitively something's happening. So I'm curious to know, what does it mean to you?
When I teach people how to be more intuitive, the first thing I tell them to do is to acknowledge their emotions and to understand what their body is trying to say to them. Intuition to me is sensibility when it comes to insensitivity, when it comes to your body and how it feels, how you feel in a certain experience and how you feel about certain experiences. It's just that simple. But then it's been played out in very dramatized ways where we are like, intuition means you can like have psychic abilities, all this kind of. Yes, but then again, everything is not on a linear spectrum. It's in all different axes. So that is just one form in which intuition can play out in the most extreme ways, right? Like, oh, I can see into the future or that kind of thing. But like, it could be as simple as understanding your emotions so well that you understand your relationship with others. You understand and you're able to see patterns that people live into. And when they show up in it, you're able to call out on that. Some people will say they have a gut feeling and they know like, oh, this person not very good person, that kind of thing. That's because you are able to be very sensitive to the ways they are showing up, their actions, their words, and have the sensibility to be able to put the keys together and the key and lock and just be like, yeah, this is what it is. So yeah, it's just that simple.
Would you say that it starts at a certain point in the body or in the mind for you, and then you start to notice all these things and you start to piece it in subconsciously?
I think all of it has to work together. There's no one way to do it. So very interesting. Again, I'll point out this one ex that talked about the incest thing.
Yep.
He is very intuitive, but he's very logically driven. But I'm more feeling based. So he's intuitive, but then with logic. How he sees it is his mind plays out infinite permutations until he picks the maybe top 3 that he thinks is best. That's the way he picks things out with his mind. And then for me, it's kind of like, okay, I feel all these different things. Which line and thread? It's very similar, but it's felt. Mine is felt. Which thread feels like the one that's most accurate? So when I'm doing channeled readings for an individual, or I'm reading the cards and trying to decipher the message and make it something that they can relate to in their own experience. So basically telling them their life story, right?
Yep.
I feel into those threads. My body will tell me yes. And if I'm uncertain about certain things, I'll be like, is it a yes or no? Yes, no, yes, no, 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 yes, no, yes, no, 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 no. Then it's kind of like a meter or sensor and it'll buzz. Yeah, so it's very much felt for me. And yeah, that's linked to claircognizance and a bit of clairsentience, like the ability to sense and feel into things. Yeah, and that's how intuition works for me. Because my body, maybe sometimes my heart will race and tell me yes, like that's a hell yes. Or for example, you can sense danger. You're walking at night and then you're like, hey, someone's stalking me right now. It's that kind of thing. It's quite primitive. Yeah, and I like to talk about this thing where we have our mind, our heart, and our gut, and these 3 parts of ourselves, right, speak very differently.
Because you mentioned about the racing heart. It could be anxiety as well.
Yes,
and
correct.
You need to know what that feels like.
Yes. So this is another methodology when it comes to understanding yourself. So the mind tends to hold on to structures and patterns. Yes. And it decides on what is right or wrong in a way. Essentially. With the ego. The ego is in the mind. The heart is just a freaking translator for our head and our gut. Our head and gut will be like, yes, no, I like this, I don't like this. And then the heart will feel perplexed because it just is trying to process what the gut and the head is trying to say. How gut instinct, if we look at it in the most primitive sense, without forged morals and identities, right? It knows what it likes. When people say they want to find their soul purpose, they want to find what works for them, the best way to tap into is your gut. But then, of course, we don't want to go all the way where you're super lizard-like and then you're like, yeah, I'm super animal, and then like I'll take advantage of everyone around me, predator mindset. You don't want to be there. So striking a balance between these 3, understanding where it's coming from, is very important. We can condition our gut to be more anxious than usual. So like fear-based kind of a space that is powering from. So again, understanding yourself, having that awareness and being mindful of which part of your body is speaking, that's very, very helpful.
Do you think there's a disconnect between, let's say, these 3 different modalities of, let's say, experiencing the world? Or there might be like a favoring of, let's say, the mind a lot more than, let's say, the heart.
It's dependent on individuals. I feel like, yeah. So it's again back to your upbringing, conditioning, the communities you grew up in, and the ways that you chose to be from then on. Because sometimes you might have a certain family structure and it just doesn't serve you, right? So you're just like, yeah, I'm going to be the total opposite. But does that really serve you? Maybe not. So you have to have that awareness. Yeah.
Is it about having balance between everything?
Yeah, but balance is not 50-50. Yeah. At certain points in time, it's 10%, 90. Maybe other points, it's like 60-40 or 0 and then 100. So it's going to look different at different points in your life for different circumstances and situations. And I feel like that's why being present in your body is so important. Yeah.
So you mentioned about alchemy before.
Yeah.
And throughout the podcast, you have introduced very interesting concepts. And with the mention of alchemy, I don't think it's a very known school of thought or philosophy today, because I think it was superseded by the sciences and the methodology and stuff like that. Because alchemy is kind of esoteric. It's thought of to be like this mystical thing where people are trying to transform, I think, one particular material to another, which is generally that's the whole thing, transmutation. I'm curious to know, do you think that why are these ways of thinking, esoteric ways of thinking, why are they still so poignant today? Why are they still so important? Because you would imagine when, let's say, physics, biology, chemistry, when you can look into the atom and stuff like that, they have already superseded. We kind of have this understanding of the world, but because alchemy came at a time when we didn't really understand the world. Yeah. So why do you think that these ideas of transmutation, these ideas of changing something normal to a goal, riches. Why do you think these ideals are still so important? So
my belief, based off my knowledge from meditation and all the realities I can see for myself, is that it's because it is true. It is truth. Yeah, it is truth. And there's truth in it because maybe now with science, we cannot understand it. Because we are definitely, yes, a lot more technologically advanced than wherever we were, but we might not be at our max potential. Why do you think there are instances where they are like, oh, there are extraterrestrials connecting with us and they have technologies that we don't have? And yeah, you can read into all the different conspiracies where people say, yeah, the microwave was developed with like some technologies they got from Area 50.
Or like the pyramids, like who built it? Like, all that thing, yeah.
So maybe it's my imaginative mind, or maybe it's from really my ability to be able to tap into all this wisdom and knowledge that maybe we generally can't see and physically feel. But it is because there's truth. And all those weird woo-woo things where people can use their mind to like move aluminium.
Or bend a spoon.
Correct, bend a spoon. There's a term for it. I cannot remember. It's like kinesthetic control or something like that. And can read up. I believe people out there will know. The mind is that powerful and it can bring into reality certain things. It's a funny thing, but it won't be funny if it really happens. My goal is to be able to snap my finger and then light a paper up on fire. I don't know.
Pyrokinesis?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So there are people who are able to do that. I mean, I haven't met them in person, but where does that come from? And your mind has to be that powerful to be able to create that reality. If I were to share, right, the pyramids were built with a large collective of a larger collective of the consciousness, maybe very different souls coming together to meditate to bring it into form. This is what I saw in my meditation, and I confirmed it with a few of my other friends who saw that also. That's a whole other story. Yeah, but if you have that many individuals believing in that one reality, that becomes reality. We can alchemize things in that same way also.
Very interesting. Are there any particular philosophies or sentences or words that have stuck with you, I guess, throughout your life that keeps on reminding you in one way or another?
So I love being a student, but I'm a very bad student. I can't cite like that one place that I've gotten it from, but I think like there is this idea. I think it's just a mix of many different things that have allowed me to see and understand life the way I do right now. If I can name a few, the idea of The Spectacles by Guy Debord. Yeah. Imagine if we understand that, we will understand why we're so caught up with media and how it plays out. And it's kind of like a critique as to how we're living right now. And then there's this whole thing called like body without organs. So how does it look like if you can change the permutations and the flow of the organs in one's system, just system as a whole? That to my understanding was a critique of the systems that exist and how we can reimagine it in a different form. And we just being able to see all these different philosophies that forces you to understand things from a different perspective. I think, yeah, all these things have been very helpful. So I cannot really quote one. Yeah, because they've all been very helpful.
And it's also learning, right? Because when you see things from a different perspective, it sometimes could be difficult to unsee. Yeah. And if it's difficult to unsee, you kind of have to experience and you kind of have to find the truth of that. And maybe it requires you to change something in your own life or something like that.
Yeah. And again, that's the beauty of it, but it can be very frustrating for people who have their first aha moments and then they go into this like crisis where they're like, oh my God, I must figure my life out. I thought I had it figured out. Yeah, which I think collectively after COVID happened, a lot of us are experiencing. Yeah, but I think it's perfect when it happens because it means that you've outgrown that version of yourself that doesn't serve you anymore. And hell yes, to that new perspective that you are able to try and understand logically, but then maybe need to incorporate into your lived experience.
It's about the incorporation that is difficult because what if it is two different or jarring perspectives that you kind of have to find a middle ground or something supersede? Because same thing with balance. If it's too much on one end, it could be bad. If it's too much of the other, it could be,
That's why baby steps. we celebrate the baby steps. Yeah.
I want to speak briefly about yoga. Why do you think it's so popular now?
I can go into so many things with how like it's been westernized and popularized in all the different ways it has been, right? But if I look at it from a spiritual standpoint,
it is spiritual. Would you agree to that?
It is.
Do we have a misconception of it? It's just like poses, it's just the mats and everything.
There are people who look at it as exercise only if they don't have that knowledge or they haven't experienced it. I've had so many individuals who practice yoga for many, many years, like way before like I started, who just only figured out like it's a very spiritual practice. So a lot of them look at it as exercise, and I think this is the universe's perfect way of getting people into spirituality. Yeah, because you look at it as a workout and then you don't realize, oh, I got myself into this thing. That's why there are people who just strictly do not touch yoga if they are very religious, because they know that it is something that's very spiritual and they don't want to go off track in their own practices and religion. But yoga is very spiritual, and I had this friend who shed light on this perspective. He's kind of like, he asked me, what is spirituality to you? And I'm like, I mean, for me, it's all the new age practices and metaphysical stuff that I'm into, right? But he said like, for me, spirituality is just a way of looking at life. It's like a perspective. And you can find spirituality in everything. And I'm like, that is so true. Why is spirituality branded in such a weird way? Like, why is it woo-woo? You know, it's not. It's something that's actually really normal. And I realized that we love to put labels on things, and that causes separation. There's a reason why religions exist, yes. And I am not saying that they are all the same, but there is truth that lines up in every single religion that you can find, you know, and you will find a common thread.
There's more similarity than differences.
Yeah. Yes. And people will be pissed when they hear this, but like when I channel like the different gods, like in a different religion, all of them say the same thing. I don't punish. You all cause pain and suffering to yourself. I just love. And I want you to enjoy and appreciate life and love. And live. That's the main message. Just in different tone. Yeah. It's just a different tone. So at the end of the day, it's the language, the symbolism, and what resonates with you. So for the new age practices and metaphysical practices that a lot of us are getting into, and like yoga, that's just what works for people. Why are people so into astrology, human design, the MBTI thing, also like so many different modalities? When I channel Source, and Source has its main message, I think Source is a lot more truthful than God's.
Wait, what is Source?
Source is the collective consciousness, the ultimate truth.
Okay.
This is what I call Source, or sometimes I call it universe. There's a lot of words. People like to call it God also. Right? When I channel that truth, that one truth and consciousness, right? What it has to say is that love is truthful. And love is truthful. Why? Because it embodies in this physical experience, in this 3D plane, all the things that you can feel and sense and touch, and also the ones that you cannot see. It is an embodiment of all of that, and it is all real, it is all true, and that is all love. And why we cannot see that is because we cause separation through creating labels and categorizing things. And yes, it helps us understand things to certain depths and details that we might not be able to if we just look at everything as love.
But it also blinds us, I assume.
Yes, it does. It causes a lot more conflict than harmony. And harmony is not everybody fine, happy, on the same page. But like, you can be on your page, I'm on my page, and we are cool. That's what it is. Yeah. But so back to yoga, like, and spirituality, right? It is a very spiritual practice because it allows you to see a perspective of life that you might not be able to see, like especially in an urban cityscape. I think yoga in itself is a very inward kind of a practice. At the start is physical asanas, very easy to get into, just the postures. But how are you getting into the postures? That takes you being mindful and present in your body in that moment to go into that pose. Are you able to go into full expression? No. Then you get frustrated with yourself. You start thinking, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. No, if you're not flexible, you're perfect for yoga. Because then you can train something up. Yeah. But it forces you to see things from many different perspectives. Just like how running can be meditative for many individuals, or pottery is actually also a very meditative experience. There's no one-way meditation can look like, besides the one where we sit down in yoga and we close our eyes and just sit in silence.
It's not just solitude for 30 minutes. You come out like feeling like a fresh pickle. It's like, it really depends on the individual's brain and how they feel towards different things, right?
Yeah, and meditation looks different for different people. And you just need to find the modality and the means of expression that works for you. That's why all these things exist. We create all these categorization and different modalities, not for us to separate ourselves from others, but to find that common ground. That is what Source always says. Like, I created all these things and allowed all of you to create all of this to try and understand each other better. And that's why we have human design, and then we try and understand. It's for a better understanding, not to cause separation.
It's also interesting that we label some of these things, let's say pottery, as a hobby, or or we label it as a hobby, we label it as work. All these things, if we were to look at it through that lens, is just a way to understand oneself. Like even in like a corporate setting, like there can be spirituality in that if you allow yourself to see it. Like if you have an open concept office versus one where you're in cubicles, it's just different perspectives, right? Different ways of going through the experience. And yoga is beautiful because it allows people to see that in an urban cityscape, and it
forces them to get active also, which is nice and pleasant. Forces them to be present in their body with their breath. Because in yoga, there's a whole part of it that's also practice in breath work and meditation. But the larger part of it is to be able to understand your place in the world, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, your relationship with your environment, your community, your society, and maybe larger, grander parts, God, divine, universe, whatever you call it. Yeah.
I recall the example that you mentioned about your friend asking about spirituality, and he mentioned something that it is in everything, right?
Yeah.
That calls to mind a memory where I think people are talking about the spirituality of, I think, olden Japan. They see life in everything, and they manifest it into like the animations and how they will add a certain sense of quirkiness, and they believe that there are like evil spirits, good spirits, and all these different things. And you can look at it through the art. It often strikes me as interesting, where I think it's Eastern spirituality and religions, they are more inward looking, while the Westerners, they tend to believe like a figurehead or something else. Is that something that you notice or you see as well?
I think like we can find common threads in all of this, but then if we see it from a different perspective and explain it from a different perspective, you'll see how on the flip side they can be, for example, in Western philosophies, let's say, it can be a lot more inward looking also, and in Eastern philosophies it's a lot more outward. How and why? Because if you don't look outwards, how can you see what is inside also at the same time? Does that make sense? So how they find marvel in everyday objects, right? In the simplest forms. That takes you looking at something beyond yourself, and then to pull that thread. That is one part that always plays out in all different philosophies. And again, it's the idea of perception, right? Are you going to step in the box and then be in the box for a while and then look outside from inside? Are you going to step out of the box to look inside? From a different perspective, macro, micro.
Yep. Everything in between.
Correct. Everything in between.
Yeah. And I believe this unique ability to introspect, I believe it's uniquely human. I think they say that, I think that's what they can't tell from animals, whether they're able to introspect to this level where we're thinking such abstract thoughts that on the outside we might be doing like a pose, but inside we're just thinking of 7 different scenarios as what will happen in the past, future, present. We're able to hold space for all these different things, and while on the outside we're just doing something else.
Yeah, and it's funny because like even in yoga poses, a lot of the poses are named after like animals.
Yep.
So we do look at them and then use them as examples and teachers also. But then actually like some animals, they do have like a certain level of consciousness and awareness, and sometimes smarter than a lot
definitely.
of us other humans than we give them self-credit for. So there's a lot that we cannot understand with just all the technologies we have, developed over time and really great where we're at, but there's a lot more than we allow ourselves to see. And that's where spirituality comes in, and that's where sometimes people go into like new age practices to try and understand all these things through a different framework. As
we wind on the conversation, I'm curious to know, how do you identify or choose or figure out what is authentic to yourself? Because if we're in the maelstrom of all these different thoughts and we know these different things and we feel wisdom from everywhere, how do you know what is authentic to you?
I can see lessons and wisdom from every single thing, but not everything would feel truthful for me. I say this after having processed my thoughts and feelings in so many different aspects, and with whatever woo-woo skills I have, seen the things I've seen in the different realities that my consciousness is playing out also. At least I know in this one incarnation, and for the reasons I've chosen to come into this body, this lifetime, what I wish to do is to be able to offer a different perspective to all the people I interact with, to interact and connect with them through conversations, through stories, if I go into the woo-woo community and introduce myself, right? The way I've told people my purpose is to help people live in harmony by embracing duality. So to be able to understand that, not to truly embrace everything and understand life for what it is, and to live into your fullest purpose would mean that you can understand your point of view, but also appreciate and embrace and accept that of another who might be totally opposing yours.
Yep.
Yeah, so again, that whole idea of victim and perpetrator, to know that there's truth in both of it, and at the same time, the perpetrator can be a victim in all of their past experiences also. And knowing that there's no one way of looking at things, you have to be able to see things from all these different perspectives to truly understand life. This is like my larger purpose. Yeah, for the whole community kind of a introduction.
Is it paralyzing to know so much? Yet you can only, let's say, like, you have to act. No, because it's funny, because physically it's kind of like linear in a sense. You can only be in one place at one time, but I guess the mind doesn't work in that sense. It's not linear. It bounces off tangents. It goes to the past. Something happened 10 years ago. You still remember it.
Yeah.
The mind isn't linear, but the body is, because you're still in physical reality.
Yeah.
It's paralyzing.
I think it can get quite paralyzing. Maybe not paralyzing, like crippling, a little crippling in some circumstances, because if I can see so many things and I know the potential reality that will play out for me just in the ability to see all these things, right, and understand it, I get very impatient. But that's my larger lesson.
What do you mean?
Because I'm like, if I'm meant to do this and I'm gonna be there already, I have the privilege to know the things I know. Why can't I already be there? But I'm in a 3D body where we measure time over here. and I still have to go through this physical experience, even though I can meditate and then go way out astral traveling and to be in different spaces that is way faster. Just communicating with light language, let's say. Like I can be there. And I appreciate being there and I love being there. But now I have this physical body on earth and this reality that I am truly controlling. I need to be patient with it and allow myself to see how my life can unfold into the ways that I already know it would. So it feels crippling only because I'm impatient.
Yep.
Perspective again.
It's a very strange lesson to have for yourself, isn't it?
It's so frustrating. I tell you, the way I've had to like reiterate the same wisdom again and again to all my clients who come in. I've managed to manifest like a life so seamless in a way where if I know I'm gonna be tired, right, my client will cancel on me that day and postpone the session, and then it just works out. Or like, so they'll tell me they got COVID, then I'm like, I get to rest today.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's gotten to a point where I look at everything as oracles in my life. The universe is telling me signs. So I know in every interaction there's a message for me. There's something for me to take away from. Maybe if I'm in a better headspace fast enough, I'm able to pick up on it immediately. But otherwise, right now, I can actually process it quite quickly, like within the next couple of hours or max 3 days. I will already know why I went through that experience. Yeah. So in hindsight, I'll know, but it doesn't take as long as like 10 years for me to recognize it. Yeah. And my clients who come in are generally facing very similar circumstances to myself at present. And I would have given them the message, but it is the same message for me.
Interesting.
And I'm very aware and mindful of not projecting my own circumstances to it. I still get goosebumps doing my reading because of law of attraction, manifestation, and the way the universe keeps telling me like, see, this is true. You tried to debunk the tarot, right? This is what life looks like. If you really allow yourself to see the intangible aspects of it and to surrender to it. So it's been very mind-boggling, can be crippling at times, but also really humbling at the same time.
Interesting. So when I was doing my research for this particular episode, I looked through tarot. I looked through different, I guess, ideas of alchemy, things being more esoteric. I looked through, I think, magic. I looked through witchcraft. I looked through green magic. And the one thing that stood out to me was intent. Ultimately focus on intent and I think hyperfixation of intent of what you want. That is the underlying foundation of, let's say, magic, let's say tarot. Is that something you would agree with, or do you see a common sensibility or common pattern throughout the things that you do?
I love that you pointed intent out. I always tell people that intention is very important in everything. I've had clients who come in and tell me, I feel like I'm getting all these malicious attacks. I'm getting psychic attacks. I think someone put a curse on me. And I tell them, do you want to give that person and their intention the power to have control over you? It's a perspective thing. So I always tell them, you will feel like you're going through these attacks, but they are only as truthful as you allow it to be.
Strangely liberating.
It is very liberating. And in that moment, they'll be like, no, you don't get it. Like, I'm experiencing all these things, sleep paralysis. And I'm like, yes, I have been through that. And I'm telling you, the only reason why all these ghosts or attacks and curse can be in your experience is only because you have that fear and you relinquish some sort of control to that person, that experience, and you gave up that part of your own autonomy to that. That's why it feels so real. And very often, like, it's so funny, placebo is a real thing. So sometimes maybe, who knows what's true, like in life, right? But I know some of them, possibly they were overthinking it. And just because I gave them that comforting perspective, they are like, hey, it stopped. I'm like, it's perspective and
like a
it's
suggestion,
intention.
right? Yeah.
Correct. And sometimes you'll be like, oh, do I need to go and find like a shaman to like help me get rid of this?
Or whatever, yeah.
Can. If you believe in that shaman and the intent they put into their work, and you believe that intent will help get rid of it, go ahead. But here is my little prayer to you. I pray for it to go away right now because it does not have power over you. And sometimes that's just enough. They don't even need to go through all those things that people have to put themselves through, like rituals and all. No need. Like, that is our very dramatic way of like saying like, okay, something is done because we see something tangible. Why can't you just set an intention and be very clear? I gave no power to this person in my experience, or this entity, or this ghost. It's back to intention, every single thing.
Because the idea of acknowledging that you have a say in it it's quite real, because if let's say the shaman comes and cleanses it, there is this drama of him doing the part, playing the part, doing the thing, or let's say the feng shui thing as well. It could be considered a placebo because you are seeing the intent. You're I guess foregoing your intent onto others. You let him do it for you and you see it. So it's the visual as well. Because
in our society, we are like, I pay money for a professional to help me with
for a service.
Yes, for that service, and the deed is done. It's just like that. But like, that's our mind's way of living through this conditioned way of being. And I have a lot of people who come tell me like, how do you read the tarot? You need to be psychic. I'm like, no, you just read the picture on the cards. They're like, no, it's not that simple. I'm like, yes, it's that simple. That's how I learned, because I did not believe in it. And they're like, how do you be so intuitive? You're born with it. I'm like, all of us are born with it. Are you tapping into it? And just that shift in perspective has a lot of my students who come for my workshops to see like, hey, actually I can do it also. And I'm like, yeah, you don't need me for your reading anymore. Perfect. Like, the goal is for everyone to be able to do their own readings and to have that level of self-awareness through your practice of yoga or through reading the cards for yourself, whatever modality works for you. Just understand yourself, just be present with yourself and use whatever helps you. And ideally, because time is a real thing in this reality that we live in, you want to do it in the shortest span of time in the least painful way possible. Isn't that the goal? Anyways, for all experiences.
I think the idea of acknowledging that you don't have this is a lot more forgiving than knowing that you have it, but you're not living up to it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, for sure. Like, oh, it's so easy. I'm gonna start using that to tell my students. Oh, so easy, right? Just say you're not intuitive, right? Then after that, you can say like, okay, Lord, I give my money to someone else to do it for me.
Because it's a form of self-soothing yourself, that because it's the whole talent thing with creativity. Oh, I'm not talented enough, but you kind of have this idea that talent is given, is bestowed. Sure, to a certain degree, but hard work is personal.
A large part. Yeah, that's a larger part to it, and like it's your perspective. I think like for the longest time I told myself like I can't do this, can't do that, and the moment I told myself, fuck it, I'm just gonna play and try, right? I realized like firstly that's a lot more liberating because I don't have to be good at it. Secondly, like I'm actually having fun with it, and because I have fun, there's no mental block. I can truly excel in all these different things.
It's funny how it works out like that.
It does. And it's the same as you telling a child like you're really smart versus another one that's like you're really stupid. The one who you've told like is smart, right, might not be really smart, but then they actually get a confidence at the very least, right? And that confidence can bring them to many places. Yeah. And I believe like a lot of us hate people who are very cocky because they can have nothing and then they can still portray themselves in that way. Like it takes a certain level of bravery to show up like that, you would think, but it's mindset. It's your mindset, and again, that first intent for someone to have told that kid was smart. Back to intention. Yeah.
I have two remaining questions before we end this podcast. The first of which, I'm curious to know, what does growth look like to you?
In my own lived experience, growth looks like having the ability to understand your point of view and that of another.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? What does that mean?
Being able to see from different perspectives, that is growth. And then to truly live into that wisdom, it is integration in your lived experience. So if the same trigger shows up in another person, are you able to forgive yourself and the person in that situation fast enough? How long before you finally let go? Yeah, I think that is very telling of whether or not you really learn from your past experiences. Yeah, that's how you measure growth, I feel like.
It's interesting that we have this peer-to-peer soothing system, that we are able to see, I think, something we experienced maybe years ago in someone else's. And maybe if we have that connection to the other person, we might be willing to step off and talk about it. It's peer-to-peer. It's not to some central authority, but we're just helping each other like that.
That's what it looks like to be human at the end of the day, right? How are you connecting with another individual? How are you able to relate to them without maybe having to live through the same experience?
Exactly.
Maybe you've lived the opposite end and you're able to shed light for them. Like, oh, I used to cheat on my partner, like for example, and then like this was my experience, and I've thankfully not been cheated on. I don't think it's a very pleasant thing to have to go through, but like because I've had friends who have been in that situation, and then I've had friends who also been cheated on, like I get to hear both sides of things, and I'm like, I don't want to live through this. Glad to have heard your stories. Can relate now to more friends who have gone through it. Yeah, and then because of this, can also talk about polyamory and why it is a perfect solution to many different issues here. but yeah, it's the ability to connect and relate and empathize with another. Yeah. I think that's what it is in how you measure growth, and yeah, it's the connection portion.
So my last question for you is, what does success look like to you right now?
What a great question to have today. Remind myself, what does success look like to me? Acknowledging all that I've managed to have gone through and have been through. All the milestones I've managed to hit, the ability to manifest cancellations without even having to sit down and then journal it down and be like, yeah, I manifest. It's just like that full on surrendering and trust. So success looks like to me, being able to surrender but still feel like I'm in control of my life.
It's quite paradoxical, isn't it?
It is, but yeah, Lord, that's why my life purpose is to like shed light on all these areas. Yeah, and to share this message that is so simple to vocalize but so hard to appreciate in experience. Yeah.
Before we end, is there anything else you would like to talk about?
No, but I love the name of the podcast for many different reasons. I think it's really cute. Yeah, and I hope for people to be able to find peace in all the noise that they are and chaos that they are living through and with. And I think there's a lot of value in being able to acknowledge one's experience through the lived emotions and even the ones that you've actively tried to block out. Maybe take a moment to read up on mindfulness or get back into a certain practice that you know used to help yourself. The practices that have helped you doesn't help you anymore. Be okay with changing trajectory and trying new things. There's expiration date to everything, but you can always go back to it when and if you have to. There's no one way to do things. Yeah.
Before we end, where can people find you online? Please.
Yeah, so on Instagram and YouTube, I'm going to start posting more content. Transmission Wellness. And otherwise on my website, transmissionwellness.net. Yeah, that's where they can find me. Not going to share my personal page. If they find it, they find it.
Yep.
But yeah, I hope to be able to connect with more individuals and if it's aligned, we'll be able to work on their traumas, their healing. And if there's space for collaboration, also very happy to work with different people and in different industries for different projects. Yeah.
Before we end, I'm curious to know, when you were young, do you imagine yourself to be in this position right now?
No lah, I always thought all these things very weird and creepy, you know. Like, I would watch those shows and I'll get creeped out.
Yep.
Like, yeah, I thought like, okay, quite interesting, magical. But I was super dubious and suspicious about all these things. And I hate like anything like so. I'll be like, yeah, so superstitious. I always thought people who went to like tarot card readers were stupid because it's a bunch of cards. How can you trust it? But I mean, now I understand it's just a tool anyways. So different perspective. No, I would have never imagined. I thought I was going to be a designer. But I guess I'm a creative in this way, and this is my modality and my medium, and I design experiences now, I guess.
I was wondering what you were going to say.
I design experiences in this kind of truthful and sincere, vulnerable, intimate communications. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. This has been a fantastic and engaging episode. Thank you.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode and feel inspired. If you enjoyed what you heard thus far, do give us a follow on Instagram. And don't forget to share and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.